What is philosophy of play and games? Philosophy of play and games investigates traditional philosophical topics, ethics, metaphysics, meaning, in relation to play and games. Some of the questions are: what is it to play a game? Can games be works of art? Are violent video games morally problematic? What is gamification and is it desirable? Should we ban steroids in sports? And how should we approach issues raised by transgender athletes? To explore some of these questions, I have joined with Professor Michael Rage from the University of Edinburgh to create a series of videos on the philosophy of play and games. Before we go on with the video, just a quick reminder: as we make more videos, I'll add the links in the card, so pay attention to this corner here. And there's also a playlist. This is a work in progress, so if you want to keep updated with the series, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Alright, now let's get back to the video. There are so many questions to explore in the philosophy of games. But maybe the first question we should address is: why do we care about making philosophy of play in games? Isn't the topic a bit frivolous? Philosophy should be about serious topics, right? Like examining human nature. But being playful and playing games are a central part of what makes us humans. While many other animals engage in play, humans are especially playful. And while other animals play, playing games is extremely rare in other species. Play and games are an important and distinctive part of human nature, and examining human nature is one of philosophy's core missions. Another core mission of philosophy is to think about what the good life is. Play is an important part of the good life. Stuart Brown went so far as to say that life without play is a grinding, mechanical existence organized around doing the things necessary for survival.
It is also the key to really looking within oneself for what is it that really motivates me, what makes me a self, what gives me a sense of purpose, what gives me a sense of future.
Play can be liberating. It provides a sense of freedom. It can also be exhilarating and just plain fun. By helping adults reconnect with their youth, play can combat alienation, reduce anxiety, promote intimacy, produce a sense of belonging, enhance sociability, and create joy.
It shows that people don't hold a monopoly on leisure, and perhaps animals, like us, just do it.
Since other animals play, pretty much all mammals, some birds, and even octopuses, it is also relevant to the philosophy of biology. Play might be a natural kind of the sort philosophers of science are interested in investigating, and it could therefore matter to the ethics of our treatment of animals, since play might matter to their well-being too.
Ultimately, video games are going to become a new art form. I don't think they're there yet. They're fun. They're not art, but they could be art.
But it's, you know, it is what it is.
Roger Ebert was wrong, right? Games are art.
Some people don't consider games as art. That depends on what we would consider art. For example, cinema is considered an art, but some, like Martin Scorsese, don't consider superhero movies as art. So, for games, we wouldn't consider Flappy Bird or Tetris as art, but maybe a game like Kentucky Route Zero or Red Dead Redemption could be considered art. But why would we consider Red Dead Redemption as art, but not Tetris? There are two ways to analyze games. We can focus on games as stories, we can focus on the storytelling, or we can focus on the gameplay features of the games. Red Dead Redemption has a rich story. That part in the game when you first ride into Mexico, a song kicks in and it's just a beautiful moment.
Step in front of a runaway train.
The landscape in Red Dead Redemption 2 has been compared to 19th century paintings. The music, the landscape, it all serves the purpose of enriching the story. But what about Tetris? Tetris has no story, it's just blocks falling. A jigsaw puzzle usually has some beautiful picture, but Tetris doesn't even have that. If we only consider games as art when there is a rich story, then yeah, Tetris is an art. But maybe there is a way to consider Tetris as art. Xin Nguyen has a very interesting theory of games as the art of agency. He says that a game designer doesn't just create a world, they create who we are in that world. Games can form a library of agencies. Each game focuses on a different mode of agency. One game can focus on speed, another on strategy, and yet another on communication. Games like Journey don't allow the player to use words, and yet it is such a unique way to interact with other people. A game doesn't need a profound story to shape our agency. Even when we play silly games like Tetris or Fall Guys, we are taking on different forms of agency. Each game has its own goals and its own rules, and that's how they shape our agency. You see, there are different approaches to analyze games, each with its own definition of what games are, and each definition leads to a different way to explaining how games can be art. We'll have videos exploring how games can be considered art. But if games are a way to experience different forms of agency, this means we can experiment with all kinds of acts, including the darker ones. In Left 4 Dead, the players kill zombies. Killing zombies is okay. Zombies are not people. What about GTA? You can rob people and commit genocide. The vast majority of people nowadays don't consider GTA as a problematic game. Okay, maybe we don't want little kids to play the game, but most of us don't care about teenagers doing crimes in GTA. After all, it's all virtual. Nobody is being robbed or killed. There are no people. They're just NPCs. If you kill a virtual NPC, could this be considered morally wrong? This is a difficult question, because it also depends on our views about morality. There are different theories about morality. Some focus on the consequences of our actions. If playing violent games don't harm anyone, and they don't make the player more violent, then maybe violence in games is okay. But some authors argue that the act itself can be morally bad or good. For example, if the NPC you are beating in the game has the same appearance as someone in your family, would you still feel okay about it? You know that the NPC isn't real, but you might feel bad about it. Even though the NPCs are not real, a game could still be racist or sexist. What if the NPCs in GTA were all kids? Or what if the game allowed other darker forms of crime like sexual assault? Well, the NPCs still are not real. If we accept violence in GTA because the NPCs are not real, then shouldn't we accept a game with darker forms of crime? This problem is also known as the gamer's dilemma. We'll have videos going deeper into this topic, the intersection between ethics and games. But this intersection isn't just about the gamer's dilemma. It's also about other ways in which games can involve morally bad actions. For example, a game might require lying, like Among Us. Lying is normally considered a bad thing. But is it okay to lie in a game? Or is it a bad game?
If we want to solve problems like hunger, poverty, climate change, global conflict, obesity, I believe that we need to aspire to play games online for at least 21 billion hours a week by the end of the next decade. No, I'm serious. I am.
What about when life gets some gaming aspects? This is also known as gamification. Gamification is when we take game-like features and apply them in non-game contexts. Fitbit is a good example. To motivate people to keep using the app, Fitbit used badges and leaderboards, which are game-like features. You can find these gaming features in all sorts of apps like Duolingo. And maybe gamification can be a good thing. It can help us to stay motivated. Jane McGonigal has argued in her bestseller Reality is Broken that gamification can save the world. We can use the incredible motivational power of games to motivate people to help solve global problems. But gamification has a dark side. So let's take an app like Fitbit. You want to lose weight and get fit, so install the app to help you. The app has all these gaming features, like getting points for exercising or counting the number of steps you take in a day. At first, this gaming stuff helps you to stay motivated. But soon enough, all that you care about is getting those 10,000 steps every day. You stop going to the gym or doing any other kind of exercise so that you can get more steps. You started with a rich set of complex values about having a healthy lifestyle. This value is complex and not simple because it's hard to transform it into points. Games have clear goals like 10,000 steps, which simplify our values. Nguyen calls this value capture. We start with the value of being healthy and we end up with the value of reaching 10,000 steps.
You know, they want, and every day the Fitbit says to me, "Are you up to 10,000 steps yet?" I go, "No!" So finally I just put on the dog.
There is much more to say about gamification, and we will return to this topic in a future video. In fact, there are other philosophical issues specific to gamification that have not yet gotten the attention they deserve. Remember that episode in Black Mirror where there is an app that you can judge other people's actions? If we perform good deeds just because of some gamification app, would our actions still have moral worth? We will discuss these interesting topics in a future video, as well as related questions about using gamification to overcome addiction, including gaming addiction.
Man, all we do is work. We need a break. Let's play a game.
What kind of game?
I have this great game.
We were talking about when life gets some gaming aspects, about doing some activities like there were games. So what about living an entire life as a game? What if life is a game? Bernard Suits is probably the most important philosopher in the philosophy of playing games. We will talk about Suits many times in this series of videos. In his masterpiece, The Grasshopper, Suits defines playing games, and he also talks about how games can bring value to life. So imagine a utopia. Perfect utopia. So it's not just a place without poverty, it's a place without any sort of scarcity whatsoever. This includes, for example, a scarcity of knowledge. In a perfect utopia, we would have complete knowledge about everything. We could have computers that store all of that knowledge, and the robots can materialize anything we need. In that perfect world, all of our needs are immediately satisfied. What would be left for us to do in that perfect world? Well, we would play games. For example, instead of using robots to materialize a house, we would use ancient tools like a hammer and a nail to build a house using our own hands. This is a far more complicated way to get a house done. We don't need to use our bare hands, but we make the voluntary decision to use this inefficient means to build a house. This, according to Suits, is a game. But would that be a life worth living? It feels like nothing really matters in that perfect world. There is nothing at stake. We have already done a video on this topic. You can check it by clicking on the card right here in the right corner, or by checking the link in the description down below. Sports are games, but playing Fall Guys or Twister is very different than playing in an official competition of League of Legends or in the Olympics. Sport competitions are serious, and one major concern in sports is the use of steroids. But should we ban steroids? Now let's think for a minute. Why steroids are wrong? Why do we ban steroids? Well, the answer will depend on what we consider to be the values of sport. One possible value is athletic excellence. The athletes push the boundaries of what's humanly possible. It's astonishing to see Usain Bolt running that fast. He can run way faster than me or anyone I know, and he's a normal human being. The fact that he has stronger legs is due to his own merit. This is another value of sport, meritocracy. Lance Armstrong won the Tour de France 7 times in a row, but he lost all his reputation because of doping. If you use some drug to enhance your performance, this taints the ideal of athletic excellence, of meritocracy, and of fairness. Fairness is a very important value in sports. Okay, so why don't we give steroids to all athletes? Well, maybe because that would go against the idea of human excellence. But the uniform the swimmers use nowadays allow them to swim a bit faster. Why do we allow uniforms that enhance performance, but not drugs? Why do drugs taint the image of athletic excellence? So many artists use drugs. David Bowie made beautiful songs when he was using cocaine, but that doesn't corrupt his image as an artist. Artists are also considered a sort of human excellence. Mozart was a virtuous pianist, and so it was Jimi Hendrix in guitar, regardless of whether Hendrix used drugs or not. But art isn't a clear competition like the Olympics. Fairness is a real issue. This is why we have different weight categories for fighting competitions like wrestling. But there are no height categories in basketball, and if you're a short person, this makes it far harder to compete in the NBA. Michael Phelps' body is an anomaly. His arms are longer than his height. But we don't make a swimming category for people with long arms. There are biological differences between people. It's not true that all men have the same levels of testosterone. And yet, the major division in sports is between men and women. And here we face a huge problem. In which division should trans men and trans women play? This is a complex and delicate topic as it depends on our definitions of gender, but it's very much related to the discussions about steroids. If we find out that a man has a very low testosterone level, should we allow him to use steroids? And what if we find that a guy has a very high level of testosterone? Should he be required to use drugs to reduce it? Now, where should trans women compete? Testosterone levels make all the difference here. A person with the chromosome XY usually has higher levels of testosterone than people with the chromosome XX. There are also other variations like XXY. Even if our chromosomes don't define our gender, they define our testosterone levels. Testosterone makes training more effective, you grow muscles faster. So, if an athlete starts using drugs to reduce their testosterone, they need to wait a while until they can compete again. Testosterone also causes another change, a permanent one. If you grow up with high testosterone levels, this will impact the growth of your bones and your skeleton. This change is permanent. Even if later in life you take drugs to reduce the level of testosterone, your skeleton will keep the same. But many women are very tall and they don't have high level of testosterone. So the same way we accept Michael Phelps' body proportions, we can accept the difference in the skeleton structure. And this is because sport is not only about meritocracy and fairness. Sports are also about inclusion, like in the Olympics. It brings together people from all over the world, from all nations, to congregate in peace and harmony. And measuring testosterone isn't as straightforward as it might seem. There is a difference between free testosterone and non-free testosterone. Just measuring the total testosterone wouldn't help much. This is a complex topic and we will explain it in more detail in a future video. Okay, we are talking about testosterone, but this seems a bit strange. Do we really divide sports between men and women because of testosterone? If that's the reason, then we should drop that division and start a new one based solely on testosterone. But are we ready to do that? The divisions based on gender and the problems transgender athletes face go way beyond matters about testosterone levels.
Look, I just hope that no matter what people think about people in my situation, that they just treat people like me with respect, because, you know, what more can you ask for?
Okay, so we've been talking about art, gamification and sports, but in all of these discussions we have touched on one problem. What are play and games anyway? When we talk about games as art, it really depends on how we define games. When we talk about the values of games and play, maybe they have different values. For example, playing an official competition of League of Legends is really different from just being playful and running around in a park. Sports, games, being playful, these are all concepts that intersect one another, but they might be different things. So if we want to make any progress in our discussions about all of these topics, first we need to have clear definitions of these concepts. And different people might mean different things by play or play a game, and then we could end up just talking past one another. Can we come up with plausible definitions for play and play a game? Some philosophers have tried that, while others have argued it's impossible. Let's just start with defining what play is. When a kid is playing with her food, she isn't playing a game, she's just being playful. Bernard Suits defines play in terms of activity you do for its own sake. We can contrast play with work. When I worked as a cook, I didn't work because I love to cook. I worked because of the paycheck. But this definition is problematic. There are so many things we do for their own sakes. For example, when I tell my mom that I love her, I do it for its own sake. But I wouldn't consider this as playing. Think of any moral act we do for its own sake. They are not playing. So the problem with Suits' definition is that it leaves all the fun out of play. This is what Michael Ridge argues. The Professor Ridge, my partner in this series of videos, he defines play as unscripted activity for the fun of it. We will return to this in a future video. Besides defining play, we also need to define what games are. Wittgenstein famously argued that we can't define games. He argued that there is no essence that all games share. Think of it like this. There's a sort of checklist of game-like features. Having rules, being done for fun, having winners and losers, being done for the sake of a challenge to overcome, and so on. The more items on this checklist that a given activity ticks off, the more plausible it is to say that it is a game. That is oversimplifying Wittgenstein's view, but it gets the basic idea across. But other philosophers disagree, like Bernard Suits. Remember I said that we will talk about this guy a lot? Suits is a very important author in this area. So he thought that there was an essence that all games shared that made them games. For him, the essence of playing a game is voluntarily overcoming unnecessary obstacles. His more formal definition puts it in terms of rules and goals. We adopt a goal, like scoring a goal in football, and we adopt certain rules that make it harder to achieve that goal. For instance, you cannot use your hands. The rules provide the unnecessary obstacles to achieve the goal. And there is a natural value associated with games on this view. We play games for the sake of overcoming obstacles to achieve goals through skill. So if you think achievements are valuable, as many people do, then games are valuable because they offer us opportunities for achievements. Look at Steam. Many people really enjoy getting Steam achievements, or the Xbox achievements, that they put even in games without clear goals, like Minecraft. But this definition has some problems. You're only playing a game when you restrain yourself by following the rules. But if you cheat, are you still playing the game? You're no longer restraining yourself according to the rules. So, according to that definition, you're no longer playing the game. But that's bizarre. A compulsive cheater like Gaylord Perry broke the rules, but he was still playing baseball. I mean, the guy's in the Hall of Fame. And what about people who are not even trying to win? These people are not trying to achieve the goal, so according to that definition, they are not playing the game. But that doesn't seem right to say. They are playing the game. Even if they're not trying to win, they might still win the game. So maybe trying to win or following the rules is not enough to define what a game is. But chess wouldn't exist if there were no goals or rules. Defining games is hard, but very important. So we will return to this in a future video. What was important for this introduction was to give a taste of what is produced in this area. We will have videos dedicated to each of these topics and many more. This was just a narrow selection of topics. Our next videos will be about the definitions of playing game. And after that, we will release videos on all of the topics presented here, but not in the same order, and also in other topics. There will be a playlist with all the videos of this series. You can consider this series as a crash course on the philosophy of playing games. If you want to keep updated with the next releases, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. So far, we have already done one video for this list besides this one. It's on Bernard Suit's argument about Game Utopia. Besides that video, I have also done one on the concept of the playful stoic. It's about one of Michael Ridge's papers and how it helped me to deal with the anxiety playing League of Legends. If you want to read an introductory text on the philosophy of playing games, you can check Ridge's paper, Playing Games, an Opinionated Introduction. Parts of this video draws on that paper too. There are also many other great introductory texts in this area. I have put the links in the description down below. But if you want to read books, you can start with Bernard Suit's book called The Grasshopper. This channel has other videos as well, but all related to games and philosophy, like videos where I use games to explain philosophical concepts. And they're all divided into playlists, so you can watch only what you want. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time!